Welcome, everyone, to DZone's virtual roundtable on data engineering in 2025. I'm Jesse Davis, Chief Technologist here at DZone, and I'll be your moderator today. We recently published our trend report, Data Engineering Scaling Intelligence with the Modern Data Stack, and we've been surveying our global software professional base to understand how data pipelines are being built, scaled, and optimized today. From storage tools to orchestration platforms to generative AI, use cases, all types of real-time data practices, and we're excited to unpack all of that with you today. And more importantly, we get to have a panel of experts here to lend us their insights and their wisdom. Let me introduce them now. First up, Dr. Sharna, Vice President of Product at AI Agents from DataStax, an IBM company, and you're a sponsor. Thank you. Miguel, Vice President of Engineering at Factorial. Welcome, Miguel. Wrote the article Data Lake, Warehouse, or Lakehouse in the trend report, so make sure to read that. And Tulika, Senior Software Engineer over at Netflix, who wrote Modern Data Ops for Real-Time Systems, Turning Pipelines into Products. So welcome, all three of you. But before we begin our first topic, it's worth noting that the data landscape is changing and evolving faster than ever. Organizations are capturing, processing, and acting on more data than at any point in human history. But with that growth comes a lot of complexity. From scaling pipelines to balancing storage and real-time trade-offs, decisions that we make today set the stage for how effectively we can leverage data in the years ahead, right? We're still building foundations for some really big systems. And in our survey, we saw that many teams are already juggling a surprising number of pipelines, and the challenges of scale are showing up in maintenance, orchestration, and tooling choices. So that's kind of where I want to start our conversation today, by unpacking what this growth looks like in practice and how teams are adapting. So the first thing, team, our survey showed 52% of those who responded are managing more than 10 data pipelines, and nearly 1 in every 5 are handling over 50. Seems to me like that's pipeline sprawl, right? What are you seeing in terms of pipeline growth? Like, are tools and teams keeping up? Or are you running into complexity and bottlenecks? Are they struggling? Dr. Sharna, why don't you start us off? What are you seeing from your side?
Yeah, sure. So from my vantage point at DataStax, we're definitely seeing a significant increase in pipelines and pipeline scale, especially as the AI agents and real-time applications become more prevalent. You know, we have a number of new types of personas that are building these pipelines. You know, we had this past where it was, data engineer goes to AI engineer, creates some sort of process that are like streamlined data pipelines. But now we're enabling developers to build their own intelligent workflows that often span dozens of micro pipelines. That is what I call it. And so they do their own ingestion, vectorization, retrieval, and generation. It's not quite as centralized as it was before. And at IBM, like, this scale is mirrored across industries with hybrid cloud architectures. They're supporting hundreds of pipelines across global teams and petabytes of data. So certainly the pipeline number is increasing, and the complexity is too, because this GenAI space needs more and more unstructured data and parsing it in this sort of natural language sort of way.
Yeah, I can see that. Miguel, you agree?
Yeah, totally agree. So I think that we evolved in the last 10 years from this data concept that was very focused on the data teams. But right now, people is not talking about application. Everyone is talking about data. So means a lot of pipelines with a lot of diversity. You know, this kind of role that is focused on data is not enough right now, even with the GenAI trend that we have right now. No, so everyone in our teams needs to know about data, no, and all the complexity about the observability, operational side. So this is increasing a lot the complexity.
And Tulika, what are you seeing over at Netflix? Like, are you having the same sprawl issues? Are you running into bottlenecks and management issues around that?
Yeah, definitely. We are definitely seeing an increase in pipelines, and it's not just like, just the number of pipelines that increasing. It's just like having such diverse set of pipelines. It's like there's like real-time pipeline, micro batch. It's just like a complicated like jungle right now. And all of these pipelines come up with their own set of like, complex SLAs and operation guidelines and runbooks and like, business requirements. So everything is becoming pretty complicated. And at Netflix, we try to like lean into automation as much as possible to like help deal with this complexity. So that means like, having centralized schema registries or orchestrators or like, centralized alerting tools to help handle this complex ecosystem.
That's a good thing and a good segue. Like what kind of advice would you have for these teams who are trying to figure out what to do next with how complicated these managing these pipelines are? And anybody, just jump in there if you think you have something.
Yeah, I mean, we're focused on making the workflow development faster and more manageable. So, Langflow is one of the open source products that we ship, and it gives developers sort of a visual interface to build the complex flows without a whole bunch of like boilerplate code. And you can drag and drop and configure these modular components, whether it's an LLM or data sources or tools. And then under the hood, it's sort of converting those flows into DAGs and handling the orchestration automatically. So as Jalika mentioned, orchestration, right? Like if your tools are modular enough and can handle both local and production deployment, you can sort of span that gap, as well as the need for testing in sort of this playground, as well as debugging once you get to production. And I do think MCP, or the Model Context Protocol, is simplifying a lot of this type of passing of data and transformation of data and making it available to agents, because, it's really providing a standardized interface, and you can plug in tools, whether it's APIs or databases, using the same component pattern, right? And so I guess my advice would be pick an orchestrator that can simplify the complexity for your end user, but also gives you modularity and scalability in production when you're actually deploying those pipelines.
Okay. And Miguel, looks like you have something too.
Yeah. So in our case, I always see the same problems with the GenAI is the same. So people forget the basics. So, right now we are facing, I see the same challenge in every company. So what is the glossary? What is the concepts align across the company? So it will be nice that, the teams, when starting working on the pipelines, not only focus on the new technologies, but also on solving from the beginning these kind of problems. And also in our side, we are trying to standardize and simplify every process. So try to standardize all the pipelines. So less pipelines or less diversity. You can provide batch streaming, MLS ingestion, but always following the same patterns, because when we follow the same pattern and we find some problem, it's easy to fix for everyone. No, so simplify and documentation is key.
I love that. And we started moving into orchestration. So I'm going right to the next point. We saw data engineers reporting spending over 40% of their time on maintenance and orchestration, often manually intervening to manage failures and workflows. This is where we're going next. Has orchestration, in your opinion, gotten easier or harder? And then what strategies are teams going to use to handle scale more effectively? And Talika, if you want to start us off, would love to hear what you got over there at Netflix.
Sure. I mean, we use Maestro as our orchestrator. It's an open source tool. I think it's been open source by Netflix itself. And it is pretty good in having automated retries and kind of bubbling up issues or problems that are having that occurred while your pipeline was running. So if it is something like platform failure or something, it tries to auto fix it. But if it is something which is related to data or data issue or something, then it would kind of bubble up that problem and kind of escalate to the pipeline owner so that they can dig into it. So I do feel with the amount of complexity we have, having some sort of having a centralized platform team which kind of build tools on such orchestrators suited to your company's working style is is going to help you sort of deal with the operational complexity.
Okay. Sharna?
Yeah, one of the things I really like about what Talika said is that the pipelines themselves are escalating sort of here's what's happening. What I think that we're moving towards is agentic loops on top of everything, right? So there's an agentic loop that looks at that escalation before a human has to, so that it can start to root cause. It can start to pull the data from all of our systems. One of the things that we're building at IBM is inside of the product suites, right? Like you probably have like 50 different product screens you could be on if you're a customer of IBM. Why do I need to open 50 different screens in order to root cause that incident, right? And ask questions like, what was the cost impact? What was my downtime? I shouldn't have to do that manually. And so I think where we're moving is activating that entirely new set of data to have these agentic loops on top, not just generating code or helping you like make a slide deck, but helping configure the infrastructure, manage dependencies, and adapt to the change that needs to happen so that humans can actually become more effective.
No, is that real or is that future? I think no, but the only reason I ask is because it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's brilliant. Is it something people can do today?
So today there's a platform that our product teams use that lets them sort of bring their data into a unified data layer. And then there's this widget that if the product lines are using it, you can pull from anyone's data. We're building the agentic loop today that activates all of those pieces. So all of the IBM products will be MCPI'd, or however you want to call that. And then the agent is going to be able to use those tools that each of those products have and put it inside of that widget. So that part is future, but it's actively being developed today.
That's amazing. That's cool. Me and Miguel are going to get me some. So Miguel, what do you think?
So, I mean, the future is amazing, no? But right now, I think that workflow, the orchestrator are good. I've been working with orchestrator a lot, and the new generation like Duster, another one that more focused with another approach, not only on the pilot, also managing the assets, and is good. But for me, the future is more choreography. So on the product side, we are not following this orchestrator approach. We are more focused on the choreography, and we also using agents, not in that way, but we will review your products and see how we can improve our
I love it.
our side. We are more focused on use agentic to detect when something is happening, identify what is the piece of code that is failing, what is the reason, and also automating the solution. No? So it's not fully automated because our agent is creating a pull request that is validated by our engineers. Because the trust is some of the things that we need to, the point that we need to solve with this agentic AI. No, for the moment there are some human in the loop in our case.
That's awesome. Brilliant ideas all around. But as we're trying to finish up this orchestration, this stuff doesn't exist in isolation though. Right. Pipelines are not isolated. They're tied to all these other systems and things that we're talking about. So as we look at the mix of approaches that people are taking, right? We were talking, Miguel, about yours, lake houses, right? Data warehouses, traditional, or data lakes, or a mix of those. The balance between, batch, streaming, real-time processing, it's a pretty strategic choice. And that's where I want to take our conversation next. So when we're looking at, the responses that we got back, there was a strong adoption of cloud native tools, right? So over half, I think we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 55% use object storage. Think S3. Right? 70% use some kind of data lake or lake house solution, but traditional data warehouses and RDBMS, or your relational systems, still dominate in production and have for decades, right? How are teams choosing between all of these? Right? I want you experts to help me parse this out, right? How do I choose between a lake, a warehouse, and real time? And do you think hybrid approaches are here to stay? And Miguel, why don't you start us off with this one? You wrote the article.
Yeah. So I think right now in the industry, there are two approaches. The first one is is this only one store that can provide any kind of workload, the transactional and analytical. And then another approach that is this sort of tool that could be this S3 with Iceberg, Delta. There are many, many open table formats that can provide this information for different engines. We experiment both. The main problem in the case of the product is the latency, because at the end, what the consumer is, a customer is consuming what is the behavior of the HR headcount or any data that they want on real time. They want this experience of, with less than 2 seconds of latency. And sometimes, at least in our experience, this other model cannot provide this kind of latency. And the other part is the ingestion in real time. Is not the same for some use cases working a second or less than 1 second than working less than 1 minute. And this, when you are using streaming with this S3 and this open format, you don't have a real time. You are working on this near real time that depends on.
Yeah, real time is really, really hard. I get it. Yeah. Dr. Sharna, what do you think?
Yeah. So I work with customers on making this choice all the time, and often they have all of these, right? So they'll have some sort of object store like S3, which is foundational for your unstructured data for sure in GenAI workflows. But as soon as you're ingesting those and you're sort of making that unstructured data ready for AI or ready for real-time agent interactions, they have to rely heavily on like hybrid databases, vector databases like AstraDB or Cassandra, and they're optimized for that retrieval pattern. In addition, there's certainly lake houses for scalability and governance, but you have to find a way to pair it with real-time streaming for their end user experience, right? So if I'm putting a chatbot on my website, I don't want to have to handle a bunch of customer support issues being like, I can't get the answer I need. This should be like this, right? Especially how, ChatGPT and DeepWiki and all these things are making it feel so rapid these days, right? So every company is having to find a way to get the data that they need for the real-time interactions there, or set a user expectation of like, my agent certainly has some real-time pieces to it, but if you're going to have me go make a travel plan that I need to go do a bunch of deep research, then they can ease up a little on the 2-second requirement and say, I'm going to go work on that and bring it back to you, right? But that switches the expectation from a real-time interaction to, I'm taking it and running with it, and I will send you an email. I will come back to you and give you the all-up plan. So
that's awesome. And I love that. And Dr. Sharna, what that makes me think of is a presentation I watched from Netflix maybe 10 or 15 years ago at IBM's Information on Demand thing that was in Vegas. And they talked for the first time about polyglot database, right? Having a bunch of different ones based on use case. So Tulika, same kind of question, right? We know Netflix, y'all have YouTube channels and all that stuff showing how complicated and how you choose the data stuff. How do you do that internally? Like, what's your process for selecting which data store to use for which piece of your process?
Sure. We have object storage. And we use Apache Iceberg or RS3 storage heavily for both real time and batch workloads. So that's like our main data store. And we use other data warehouse only for very niche use cases where almost everybody is going to be using, because just dealing with the volume of data we have, that's the best route for us. And also in terms of cost, and also it kind of, allows a separation of having different compute engines. So we can kind of choose, we want to run Presto, or we want to run Spark over it. So I think that's one of the things. But there are obviously various real-time use cases. And for that, we have other solutions, like we have time series databases, we have key value pair databases. So it really depends on your requirement and what's your end goal. And depending on that, we have different options that we can kind of like, work with.
Yeah. And speaking of that, that'll get me right into my next question. So thank you for the easy transition. Despite all the innovation that we have around real-time streaming, right? And Miguel, you alluded to this earlier, real-time is really hard. And 27%, only 27% said their data workloads are still mostly or fully real-time. Batch remains default. Right? Why do you think that's still so dominant? Do you think it has to do with use cases? What Dr. Sharna said with, how people, are expecting it to be faster now, right? With ChatGPT, why are we struggling to get there? What's kind of standing in the way? Because we know people are expecting it, right? Is it too costly? Is it overhyped? Is it technically not that easy? Like, what do you think is really pulling at that? And Dr. Sharna, why don't you start if you don't mind? I'd love to hear what you think.
Sure. I mean, I think batch is still dominant because it's predictable. It's easier to govern, especially in regulated industries, right? Real-time tools require this shift in mindset and architecture. It's both. And that said, we are seeing like ROI in those real-time use cases when it makes sense, right? So customer support agents, fraud detection, transactional, anything like that. We definitely see benefits in real time, but there's this trade-off that someone needs to make, right? The key is aligning the real-time capabilities with the business critical outcomes. And oftentimes, if it's not business critical, why take on the complexity or the management of these systems that people feel is more unpredictable and harder to manage?
Okay, so there's a lot wrapped up into that. Miguel, you agree?
Yeah, totally. So there are other use case, that is, one of them is the complexity, and the people that are trying to do the same pipeline in real time, they need to know more principle, the eventual consistency and the ordering of the information. There are many concepts that they need to know, and it's not easy. And the second one is there are many processes that require a full context. It's not easy to provide the value only with some time window. Imagine finance, compliance. These cases require data for all the day, for 1 year, for a quarter. It's not only the real-time information. So I see the batch processing and the batch pipeline provide value. Not everything is real-time.
Okay, awesome. Tulika, anything to add?
Sure. Like whenever we are implementing any pipeline, we really ask this. We ask this question: is like, do we really need real time? Is there an actual use case for this, or are we just doing real time for the sake of being real time? So, I think real time is pretty useful for like if you want to do real time personalization, or if you are monitoring quality of experience metrics. So in all of those use cases, it makes sense. But for like analytics, it might not deliver much value if like 1 minute is not going to change a lot of your metrics. And you can probably wait for some time, get the complete data, and actually use that to derive some useful insights. Also, real-time pipelines are like a bit tricky. They are costly. They require specialized storage, and plus backfillability is like pretty bad. I have had bad experience with backfill operations. That is also challenging. So I just feel like because of all of these reasons, it's like we would really prefer batch, because it's like battle tested. It's been out for so many years. We have better tools. We can monitor data quality pretty well on batch compared to real time, where it's like you have to handle data arriving and there's other reasons. So those are some of the reasons why people still would prefer batch over real time.
Yeah, good answers. All right. My favorite questions. We're going to get there right now. We're going to talk about AI. Every single talk that I do, we talk about AI. So get ready. Right. It's funny. It's impossible to talk about the future of data without talking about AI, right? Everybody's talking about it. Even like my sister, who is doing landscaping, is talking about AI. So let's get into it. One of the most interesting data points in the whole survey, 60% of respondents say GenAI tools are already being used in their data engineering tasks. Maybe it's shocking, maybe it's not, right? But the most common applications, data cleaning, documentation, and SQL generation. as an ANSI SQL like expert group person, I'm a little offended people aren't learning it. But how have your teams, like, what are y'all doing with GenAI? Any standout use cases, lessons that you've learned as you've tried to either yourself or watched other teams or customers or clients try to use GenAI within their data engineering tasks? And we'll start with our expert, Dr. Sharna.
I mean, I use GenAI every day, and so does every department at DataStax. We started, I would say, last year saying it's essentially unacceptable not to be using it, even if you're having a problem like code generation or whatever. It's moving so quickly, you have to. And so it's very central, not just to our product strategy and how we're bringing things to market, but in the way we work. So we use it for data cleaning, schema inference, even pipeline generation. And if we're not doing that, then we don't know, as builders of the products that our people are using to make these apps, then we're going to be so far behind, right? And it doesn't get it right all the time. But the moments, and there was a lot of resistance, I would say, in the beginning because of how rough it was around the edges when it was doing some of these things. But as people learned to prompt and learned, okay, well, I'm going to use Claude for this and I'm going to use this for that. And they found exactly like their flow or the click of what that thing could do to help them. It 10x their productivity. And it just keeps doing so, right? And so I think part of what I'm excited about in my day-to-day with GenAI is I'm actually writing code now again. I used to, 20 years ago when I first started in the industry, I was in signal processing, so it was a lot of embedded code. But now as a product leader, when my engineers are building something, I'm like, cool, get it on my machine. Let's get it working. Let me play with it. Because so many of my passion projects outside of work, I can now be a domain expert in landscaping. Or one of my favorite companies is called Supplant. It's over in Europe. They are instrumenting plants. So oxygen, water, sunlight to optimize the care. Like, it's magic what you can do. So I don't know, a little bit of a tangent there. But yes, it's absolutely helping us. We use it in coding. We use it in debugging. We use it in data cleaning and even checking sort of when you're measuring accuracy or relevance, what have you. We are using LLMs as a judge when we're trying to decide, is this good enough in the POCs with our customers, et cetera.
Yeah, a little concerned about the size of the plant in the corner, but we're just going to put a pin in that.
There's a chain going up to the ceiling, so it actually goes all the way up to the ceiling.
Okay. Well, we heard optimizing oxygen and all the things. I was just making sure you're okay. It looks amazing. Miguel, what do you think?
100% agree, no? So I think this is a cultural change. So at Factorial is a must. So everyone should use these tools because, it's they boost the productivity of the people. So we are using in many places on the code generation, on the validations, also automate many things, and also with the customers. Because the reality is our customer, they don't want to know about SQL. You know that I like SQL, but they
right
now
heart,
they want.
It's true.
Yeah, that is true. They want to interact with natural language. That is the thing. So this now is changing everything. So we are in, as many companies, but Factorial, we're investing a lot to focus all our strategy on AI and on this tool. We are doing very fast. So, and for me, probably you are seeing the same. So in the last 20 years, I never seen something growing so fast like today. It's amazing.
I agree. The only thing that grown that fast is that plant. So Talika, Netflix, what's going on over there? What are y'all doing with GenAI?
We are mostly using GenAI, at least now, for employee productivity. So it's like, if you're like code scaffolding, if you're just starting any project, it can like generate like starter projects for you and like, documentation, unit testing, all of that. Plus, like, if you're debugging, especially if you're looking at code which has not been touched for a while, it's a quite useful tool to help explain what's going on over there. And other than that, like, we also try to like, so we have Slack for support, so support questions. So we like to kind of like feed it our Slack conversation and train it so that it can also answer like, basic questions about our product if somebody is coming and asking. So something like that. Mostly like focused on like employee productivity.
Yeah, and for the documentation piece, a quick plug for open source here. If you haven't used DeepWiki to index an open source repo that you're trying to come up to speed on, you're relying on their documentation. Oof, their documentation is always going to slow you down because it's never answering a static documentation site is never answering the question that I'm coming to ask, right? And I always go to DeepWiki first, and then if the open source repo isn't there, I index it, and then I go to their doc site and I validate, this is actually accurate.
That is a pro tip. Yes, 100%. All right. So we talked a little bit about GenAI, and I like how we started talking about the human element, because that's one of the things I want to end with. We're going to be pushing up on time, but every successful data initiative, behind all of that, there's a team of human beings that make it happen, right? Whether they're using amazingly productive tools like AI or, the software that other companies have write, there are humans back there. And so as we look at them, y'all did a real good job kind of showing how people have started to adopt Gen AI to make it more productive. And I love that. But when we asked about the current team setup, most respondents said that data engineers, 68%, data scientists, 45%, and analytics engineers, 38%. And despite the emergence of a platform engineer role, which was hotly debated in another talk we had last month, adoption's still early, right? So are new roles like these, like data product managers, platform engineers, are they becoming more common in your organization or organizations Like, how is the team structure evolving in the midst of the pipeline complexity, the Gen AI changes, and all of the things? Like, there is going to be a fundamental shift. And I want to talk about that human element for just a minute. And Talika, why don't we start with you, what you're seeing over there at Netflix?
Sure. I do think that with like Gen AI, we are starting to see new jobs about like, we are having Gen AI platform teams that are kind of like building centralized tools and applications for us, which can be useful for the entire organization. So that role is definitely involving, plus like, the entire ecosystem of like, having like ML engineers and all of like data engineers serving that in particular. And another thing that I'm noticing is like, right now, data engineers have to deal with a lot of context. It's like, constant communication with like, engineering teams and who are producing this data, business team who are analyzing this data, analytics team. So it's just like, along with like code generation and like, managing pipelines, there's just like so much like conversation, communication happening, which right now kind of engineers are dealing by themselves. But I do imagine very soon we'll be having a data product manager as a role, because like as we already discussed, like, already we have tons of pipelines and complexity to deal with. So this is also like an added new responsibility right now, which is kind of making things a bit hard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Miguel, what do you see?
So we see it in a different way. So we think that all the AI evolution allow us to focus on the product, on solving problems. So we don't see roles right now. We only see product AI engineers that can focus on the product. So on my teams, we are not looking for data engineers or ML engineer. We focus on looking for people that want to solve problems and face challenges. And it's working very well, because if you see on the last 10 years again, what was the main problem on the data wall? Was this silo that, you have this centralized team working on the data, always the bottleneck, because there are now one owner the data. So in our case, is working a different way, because everything that we are divided and organized on domain is on their data. So they are working with the data as a product. So, I think that the AI allow us to focus on the important things. Of course, the data and code is important, but more important is the business problem that we want to solve.
Okay, awesome. Dr. Sharna?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Well, I agree with both of you. So here's what's happening. So when I talk to our customers, it depends on if they consider themselves a tech company or if they consider themselves, a different kind of a company. So a lot of companies that are saying, okay, I'm a tech company, they are having platform engineers and they're expanding that scope from just AI platform to platform because you're having to make so many more recommendations and enable so many more things. They're no longer just using like GCP or AWS tooling to do their job. They're also using and enabling the tools for product managers. However, in my case, we are expecting people in a product role to also expand their scope. You can't be like an AI product manager or a data product manager. You're a product manager and you are responsible for the instrumentation of your product, knowing exactly what's in your data, knowing what your user journey is. And you need to be managing not only the features in your product, but the data for your product as well. And so I think it's a shift in, and AI is making space for this, right? A lot of the things that were like very manual tasks for product managers before, we can get those done very quickly and we can focus on the bigger picture. And so, from data engineers expanding their capacity of just looking at pipelines and talking to engineers, they're talking to business owners, to product managers, right? They're serving a wider group.
Yeah.
Product managers are also having to do more as well. And so I think it depends on if you've hit that path that you've mentioned, Miguel, where you centralized everything and then it broke because you were like, the team can't handle it. Why are we hiring 250 of these people?
Yeah.
You have to find a way to democratize it. And that means cross-functional teams. That means increasing scope and getting more expertise and using AI to get you there.
Yeah, I love it. I'm seeing the same things y'all are all over the place. Depends on the company and the philosophy and all the things. Awesome. Last question. 1 minute each, because we're running out of time. We'll wrap up. But if you could give one piece of advice to a team trying to scale up their data engineering capabilities this year, what would it be? Talika goes first.
Okay. I think my one piece of advice would be not just increase think about scale in terms of like increasing number of pipeline or data, but also invest in scaling data trust. So I think a big problem that we have right now is like data quality, especially if you introduce real-time pipelines. And, if you don't plan it for it, right at the very beginning, it becomes a really big mess to sort out later. So that's my one piece of advice for others that are just starting out and thinking about scaling their teams.
Awesome. Miguel?
For me, it's I think that the data is a product discipline. So you think that you need to think the data is a product and work on that. And also, it's the data quality. Because, we can use any agents, the next evolution, but if the data they are working on is not good, so the outcome will be wrong also.
Okay. Wrap us up, Dr. Sharna.
I think to build on that, design for change, right? You're not going to get the perfect schema that serves all of your use cases. So if there's schema evolution or model drift or shifting compliance needs, your systems have to be adaptable. So if you're still in that mindset of like, I will build this one thing and it's going to work, and as long as the people put the data in right, that's not how the use cases are evolving, right? The data may be right for this use case and it won't be for another one. So modular architecture, strong observability, and those workflows with human in the loop, right? So if you have the ability to have your product data owner to make the change they need or observe the thing that's happening, then they can make a change that's going to make it better for themselves, right? So you're designing for people and you're designing for change.
Awesome. Good insights. All right. Well, that's it. It's all the time we had. We could have talked for hours. And that's it. So thank you each for lending your insights, your expertise, your real world, examples and all the things that you're seeing. It's been such a great roundtable. And of course, thank you to everyone out there, and a special thanks to DataStax, an IBM company, for sponsoring us in our discussion today. We hope that all of you out there are leaving with some fresh ideas and practical takeaways you can put into action and take this back to your own companies. If you want to see more discussions like this, head on over to dzone.com/events to see all of our on-demand content. Until next time, take care and keep building great things with all that data. Bye-bye.